Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Money's with Mover. I am Mover, C.W. Lemoine, author of the Spectre series and the Alex Shepard series. If you haven't checked those out, please do. That's what supports the channel. Alex Shepard series is more of a law enforcement terrorism thriller series, and the Spectre series is aviation related. It's about an F-16 pilot or former F-16 pilot and getting into some espionage thriller type novels. Also, the Alex Shepard audiobook is now available. If you're interested in that, please check that out. Leave a review, it helps. That's what keeps the channel going. So for today's episode, I thought I would talk about one of the more frequently asked questions I've been getting lately, which is what's it like to pull G's in a fighter? A few people have been asking me, is it something you can prepare for? Is there something I can do to prepare for? So today I thought I would kind of go over what G-forces are, definitions, concepts, and stuff like that, what it's like to pull G's in a fighter, and then at the end I'll talk about a few things that we can do as pilots to prepare for them and then to counteract them once in the aircraft. So hope you guys are having a great week. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, so to start it off, what are G-forces? Well, a G is gravity. It's the acceleration of gravity. In this example, we use Earth's gravity, which is if you're from a country that has won a world war or put a man on the moon, it's 32 feet per second squared, or if you prefer metric, 9.8 meters per second squared. And what that means is that is the force sitting at 1 G, so 1 times the force of gravity that you're experiencing right now. I'm sitting here watching this, assuming you're not on a roller coaster or pulling G's or something like that, an airplane, which I don't recommend. So 1 times your body weight, essentially. That's the force you're feeling right now. Anyway, so you have that in level unaccelerated flight. And for a fighter, obviously it can pull more G's than average airliner. Your average airliner, 2 G's max. There are 2 types of G-forces that you experience as a fighter pilot. There's instantaneous, where you pull a high amount of G's and the aircraft can't sustain it. You overcome the lift limit line, and that's usually what you see in high performance aerobatic aircraft like an Extra or Giles 202, something like that. They can pull 9 G's, they just can't sustain it because they exceed the lift limit line. The aircraft stops flying after you get to that point. Sustained G's are what we experience when we talk about fighters, and that's why it's so much worse, because there's 2 parts to that too. There's G onset rate, and then there's the ability of the wing to sustain the G forces. So, for example, like the T-37 was known for a very fast G onset rate. So it could pull, 5, 6 G's, but it could get there very quickly. So if you weren't on top of your game, it would hurt you. It would hurt you because you weren't ready for the G forces. For an aircraft like the F-16, it doesn't have that quick of a G onset rate in comparison, but it can sustain 9 G's and hold 9 G's because it has such a high thrust to weight ratio. So what happens physiologically when you pull G's? Well, sitting at 1 G, your body maintains its blood pressure. The G force comes vertical. We're going to talk about vertical G's. I'm not going to talk about lateral or anything like that. Vertical G's are basically what's coming through the top of your noggin. When you pull G's, your heart now has to pump twice as hard because it has to move the blood from the center of your chest or from your heart to your head, and also it has to move from your lower extremities. And that's what happens in your body is the blood starts to pool in your lower extremities because of G-forces. Gravity is now working twice as hard. It's kind of like when you're lying in bed, you've been lying down for a really long time, and you sit up real fast and you get lightheaded. That's essentially what's happening. Your blood pressure is having trouble regulating. So the more G's you pull, the more likely it is for the blood to pool in your lower extremities, and it's harder for your heart to pump the blood into your brain, which that's what your brain needs oxygen, right? That's what keeps you conscious. If you put somebody in a sleeper hold, eventually they'll pass out because there's no more blood flow to their brain. They're losing oxygen. So the other part to that too is when you pull G's, not only is it a blood flow issue, but if you were to exhale under G, it's hard to inhale again. It's hard to get that air back. So once you've let all the air out with the force pressing down on your chest, it's very hard. It's like somebody standing on your chest. It's very hard to breathe. So if you've already now to try to breathe again, it's very hard to get that back. So those are the 2 things, the 2 biggest issues of what it's like to pull G's in a fighter because we have to counteract that. So in fighters, we wear different pieces of equipment. The first thing, most common thing you've probably seen before is a G suit. Okay, this is an old decommissioned G suit. This is the midsection part, wraps around your body, and this tube hooks into the bleed air of the aircraft. So engine bleed air, it's air from the engine, essentially. The jet engine, it's like bypass air or air that's not being used. And it inflates. So this G suit starts to inflate at about 4 Gs, and it gives you about a G to a G and a half of protection. What does that mean? So if you're pulling 4 Gs, it inflates. The reason it does what it does is it inflates around your legs. So you can see here, it goes around your legs. You've got comfort zippers on the side. It inflates around your legs, and it pushes against your legs to help keep the blood forced upward. So, you have a pooling issue. It's like compression socks or whatever. You have blood trying to pool in your lower extremities, and it's trying to help you push that blood back to keep it from going down, from losing consciousness in your brain. So it inflates at 4 Gs, gives you about a G and a half of protection. That's not enough to keep yourself from passing out. You still have to do what's called an anti-G straining maneuver, which I'll get to in a second. But that inflates, and at full inflation, it basically is tightening down on your legs, tightening down on your lower abdomen, and on your calves. So there's also what's called the advanced technology anti-G suit, the A-tags. That's a newer G suit. I'll put a picture up here. It's a better G suit. It's more what they're using now. It's still not 100%. It's actually, it's helped guys out a lot. So what also you have to combat the problem of air, at least in the F-16, a lot of aircraft, the F-18 didn't have this, but this helmet here has what's called combat edge. So this mask is specially designed. See this line right here? The line goes to the helmet and a bladder in the helmet. And what you do in the aircraft is when you would pull G's, it's called pressure breathing under G, the aircraft would give you forced oxygen to help keep your lungs inflated. And when it would force the oxygen, it would also inflate the bladder in the helmet, which would force the mask close to your face, which under G would keep your lungs inflated, would help keep your lungs inflated. But we don't just rely on that. We use what's called the anti-G straining maneuver. And some people call it the Hick maneuver, but it's less about breathing and more about muscular control. Because the biggest parts of that, it's you're flexing your buttocks, you're flexing your quads, you're flexing your hamstrings, and your abdominal core and your calves. And that is helping to push the blood back up. And that is the biggest part of an anti-G straining maneuver. That's why people don't need G suits in these extra aerobatic aircraft like the Extra 300, because the G suit helps, but doing a good anti-G straining maneuver actually is what keeps you conscious, because you're using your muscles to push the blood back up or to keep it from pooling in your feet, or in your lower extremities. So when you're doing that, so you're doing your G strain. The other part to that is the breathing. And a lot of people think it's just like a hic. It's not. It's a preparatory breath. So you take a deep breath, if you will. And then knowing that you're going to pull the G's, and then it's a quick air exchange. Okay, so you're not exhaling all the way and you're not inhaling on the way. Because if you exhale all the way, the air's gone. You're not going to get it back, especially if you're pulling 8, 9 Gs. It's gone. Until you let off the G, you're not going to get it back. It's just a quick air exchange that allows you to, breathe, get a quick exchange, oxygen, carbon dioxide. But it also keeps your lungs inflated, because once they deflate, that's it, game over. To practice this, prior to starting a high G fighter training program, you go to what's called the centrifuge. The centrifuge is a torture chamber, and basically what it is you sit in this little spinning orb, and it spins you up to 9 Gs. It gradually gets you up. It goes 7 Gs, and then depending on what you're flying. But it puts you at G forces that feel nothing like the airplane, feels twice as bad. And you practice your G straining maneuver under G. There's various profile. There's the F16, which has the reclined seat, 9 Gs for I think 15 seconds. And then there's a check 6 profile where you look over your shoulder and pull Gs, because when you look over your shoulder, it's even harder. It's not easy. So, but that helps you prepare, it helps you train, helps you practice when you're not in an aircraft. The thing about pulling Gs, so I mean, what's it like in practice? It depends. You know, your G tolerance kind of changes from day to day. You know, if you're hydrated, if you've been working out, if it's your second flight of the day, those are all things that can affect how good of a day you're going to have or how bad of a day you're going to have. And as a professional pilot, usually you can, you know, change your game plan based on how you're feeling that day. You know, if I'm kind of feeling a little dehydrated and maybe not feeling up to task, I may not pull 9 Gs. You know, I may try to do some more vertical maneuvering so that I don't have to pull Gs. You know, or I may just go, look, I'm not good for this training sortie today. I mean, that's all up to the pilot. In the aircraft, you don't notice it as much, especially if you've been doing it a while. You know, you get used to the G strain, you get used to practicing. When we go out, every sortie, we go out and we do a G warm-up, which you saw with my instructor in the T-38, where the first turn's 180 degrees a turn. It's a 4 to 4.5 G turn.
See if I can do this. All right, here we go.
Pull, you're passing 3 Gs, 4 Gs. You're fairly level, so you're bleeding your energy. That's all right. You're at 4 Gs. That's good pitch attitude. 440, 4 Gs, sustaining 4 Gs. Good work.
And that checks the system. So we're just make sure that the G suit's inflating, and you know, that kind of preps your body, because your body has kind of like a muscle memory for it. You know, the first time you pull Gs, you may be a little weak, but as you do it, it kind of, okay, you know, your blood pressure rises and it kind of gets used to it. And then the second turn is a 5 and a 5.5 G turn, and that is checking to make sure you're good to go fly. So we always check prior to training to make sure we're feeling up to the task.
That was a good G warm-up, by the way.
Okay.
And now we're going to try it, same basically mechanics. Maybe you could roll a little faster and then go to 5 Gs this time.
All right. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. There you go. 5 Gs.
A little buff it.
Yeah, that's fine. 5 Gs.
Yeah. Bled off a little bit.
We'll do the G warm-up, then we'll do the G exercise, and then we'll start maneuvering. And if you're not feeling good, you know, obviously it's time to do an alternate mission. But if you're feeling up to it, that's when we'll pull Gs. When you're pulling Gs, you know, and for example, in this right here, I'm pulling about 7 Gs. You know, once you've done it enough, you just don't notice it, but, you know, it is important to stay on top of the G strain. What can happen, you know, there's various stages that you begin to recognize with G lock or G induced loss of consciousness if you gray out. So the first thing that will happen as your blood is kind of leaving your noggin is you'll start to get tunnel vision. You'll lose your peripheral vision, and you'll start to lose color. So it'll kind of get gray, and then it'll start to, you know, you'll start to just kind of barely see, like you're looking through a soda straw. And that's when you know, hey, I need to let off. That's one thing. You know, I need to stop pulling Gs, and then I also need to get on my G straining maneuver. You know, I need to strain harder because I'm not doing that. Common myth or misconception, people think, you know, it gives you hemorrhoids or you're going to poop your pants or whatever. If you're straining like that, you're doing it wrong. It is not that kind of straining. So whoever told you that, wrong. So, but G-lock is a threat. As I talked about in the memorial video, and I talked about an article I wrote about G-lock, I did lose a friend in the F-16 basic course who did G-lock, and the way he G-locked was he was doing high aspect BFM in an F-16, and you know, he was tired, and it was his third set, and he was focused on trying to win, and he was fighting to the bell, and you know, it happened. The technology that has come out since then is, you know, they've added what's called the ground collision avoidance system, which if it detects a certain nose low attitude and no control inputs, it will automatically recover, which I think is awesome. There's also, like I talked about, the A tags, which helps. It helps increase your G tolerance. I think pulling G's is probably one of the riskiest things we do because it's so dangerous. If you're a single seat guy, there's nobody there to save you if you don't have the GCAS, the ground collision avoidance system. So, it's very important to be hydrated. It's very important to be on top of the G straining maneuver because you have to recognize it and you have to know when it's time to say uncle before you hurt yourself, you hurt somebody else, or the worst happens. The G's also, besides just the risk of G-lock, that is what most of fighter pilot injuries come from. Because, for example, one of my first injuries in the F-16, I was flying high aspect BFM, pulling 9 G's, and the idea when you pull G's is you set your head on the headrest, especially if you're going to look away from you, because if you try to move your head, 9 times, your head weight, with all the helmet mounted cueing system, all that stuff, you're talking 15 pounds on your neck times 9. So when you get that, you're talking over 100 pounds of force or more on your neck, and you try to pick it up off the seat and you're trying to move and turn, you can tear tendons, which I did. That's what happened to me. You can tear tendons in your neck, and it hurts. It definitely hurts really bad. So it's always important to make sure you have a good body position. The other thing that can happen too is you can have back issues just from seating positions and stuff. The T-38 is notorious for this because the older T-38s had parachutes. Just the way you're sitting hunched, when you pull G's, you're putting pressure on your spine, which can cause back pain, back issues later down the road. So it's important to take care of yourself. How do you do that? Well, you got to go to the gym. That's why they say fighter pilots are athletes, because you have to, the way that you prepare for it and the way that you train, there's no way other than going and getting in a jet or getting in a centrifuge. There's no way to practice. But to keep yourself in good physical condition, you have to do exercises. And what are the best exercises? Core exercises. Having a strong core is hugely important because that's what most of this is, and that'll help you with your back. There's neck exercises you can do at the gym, neck machines and stuff that can help build up the strength. But more importantly, your legs. Don't skip leg day. Squats, deadlift, lunges, all those things help keep your legs stronger so that you can pull more G's. The guys that can pull the highest amount of G's are the guys with no neck, because there's not much distance here, that have higher-ish blood pressure, but strong core, strong legs. One of the buddies, in fact, Simple Jack, he was in the Hornet Squadron. He had probably one of the highest G tolerances because he was a deadlifter, he was a power lifter, and that's pretty much what he did. So going to the gym, working out, doing a lot of high-intensity interval training, more of that than aerobic activity will keep you good. So that's how you prepare for it. There's the equipment, there is staying in shape, and there's just doing it. The more you do it, the easier it gets. But it's still, every time you go out there, it's still a bit of a risk. So it's fun. It's fun to go pull G's. It's fun to pull G's, especially when you're winning. It sucks when you're losing, and it sucks when you have to, when you're defensive and you're trying to look over your shoulder and fight. That you're moving around in the cockpit a lot under high G, and it's definitely, you have to be in fairly good condition. But it's not insurmountable. It's not something, it's something that you can do with training. It's nothing that, you have to be born to be able to do or anything like that. It's just something you get used to. And then, in some of the higher G fighters like the F-16 and the F-22, they have specific centrifuge profiles so that you can practice and do it. So the first time you go out there is not the first time you're actually doing it. So there's ways to prepare. And then, there are other fighters that just don't pull a lot of G's, like the A-10, the F-18. When I went from the F-16 to the F-18, it was kind of a G reduction because, the most G's I ever pulled in the F-16 was on an over G. I didn't intentionally do this. I ended up supersonic at the merge by accident because I left the throttle in too long, and it was just poor BFM on my part. But I pulled 9.8 G's, and that sucked. So, but I had a really high G tolerance from doing it a lot, and I learned how to deal with it. And then when I went to the F-18, it was a G reduction because I'm used to pulling 9 Gs, and the thing only pulls 7.5, and even 7.5. A lot of these fights, you're not at 9 Gs for a long time. You're not at 7 Gs. In the Hornet, we rarely. When you'd fight, you'd spend a lot of time in the 4 to 6 G regime, but not much over 7. It was very rare, but it did happen. So the F-16, yeah, you're going to pull more Gs, but it's made for that, and you'll get used to it, and it's just something that you're going to have to cope with. So it's part of being a fighter pilot, and it'll make you better. So hope that explains it. I hope that's as clear as mud. I know it's a lot to think about, but definitely don't let it discourage you if that's something that you're worried about being a fighter pilot, because it's not a big deal. It's just something you have to be aware of and you have to move forward with. Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Mondays with Mover. Hope you've enjoyed. If you did, please leave a comment below, like, share, subscribe, and I will see you next time.